Translation has been a topic I've avoided for quite a bit of time. This is because translations can be a bit intimidating to newcomers. It's not at all, but it's kind of boring and time-consuming. Throughout the years, developers have come up with solutions for translating scripts, from creating arrays, classes, or even a PECL extension. Each solution has its pros and cons. WordPress has decided to opt into the getText extension. getText isn't specific to PHP or WordPress. It's actually a standard created to help with translating programs. PHP implements getText into its programming language, and WordPress leverages this by providing an API. The getText extension is a pretty hard concept to understand and use, so we won't be going over it how it works. It's not really the end of the world if you don't know the whole logic behind it. For the most part, you never have to worry about checking to see if this extension is enabled. Most PHP servers come with it installed and enabled by default. As a result, WordPress uses this translation system itself. If the getText extension doesn't work, then WordPress won't work. So it's safe to assume if a user installs our plugin, then they won't have any trouble with translations. In the resources section of this lecture, I provide a link to WordPress's internationalization codex page. Here's what WordPress has to say about it. Internationalization is the process of developing your plugin so it can easily be translated into other languages. Localization describes the subsequent process of translating an internationalized plugin. Internationalization is often abbreviated as H18N because there are 18 letters between the I and the N, and localization is abbreviated as LTN because there are 10 letters between the L and the N. Seems like a complicated process, but I promise it's not. The first step to translating a plugin is to make all strings inside our plugin translatable. Fortunately for us, we've been doing that from the start. Let's go over some of these functions. The double underscore function is the most commonly used translation function out of all of them. It has two parameters, which is the string to translate and the text domain. The text domain is a unique ID which WordPress uses to translate our strings. The other function is the underscore e function, which does the same thing as the double underscore function, except it will echo out the value rather than returning it. The third function is the underscore x function, which allows you to provide context to a translation. There are words out there that are spelled the same but have different meanings. By using this underscore x function, you can provide a comment to the translator for more information. The last function is the underscore n function, which is for plurals. It's a bit more complex and we don't actually need it at the moment, so we won't be going over it. However, if you need to translate a string with plurals, then you should definitely check it out. Now that our plugin is translate ready, we have to inform WordPress where it can find the translation files. In the main plugin file, add the action hook plugins_loaded. This hook will run when all plugins are loaded. This is the recommended hook for loading translations. The function to call is ju_load_text_domain. Create a file in the includes folder named textdomain.php and define our function here. Lastly, include this file from the main plugin file. Inside our function, we have to call the WordPress function load_plugin_text_domain. This function has three parameters: the name of the text domain, which is recipe. The text domain name should always be the name of the plugin folder. The second parameter is actually deprecated. WordPress keeps this parameter for backwards compatibility. We're going to set this to false. The third parameter is the location of our translations. The path will be relative to the plugins folder. I'm going to create a variable named plugin_dir and set its value to recipe/lang. We're going to store all our translations in a folder called lang. It's important to note that you don't have to name your folder lang. It can be whatever name you want. However, a lot of plugins and themes use the name lang as a convention. Lastly, let's create the folder lang inside the recipe plugin. That's it. WordPress will now load translations from this folder. However, we don't have any translations. Despite this, WordPress won't throw away any errors if it can find a translation. Now it's time to start generating some translations for our plugin. There are three important files when it comes to translating plugins. That's the mo, po, and pot files. Each of these have a purpose in our plugin. The pot file is a template that contains all our translations. WordPress does not load this file. The purpose of this file is for translators to open this file and then change the text to their desired language. This is a file that should only be modified by a developer. The PO file is like the POT file, except it's meant for translators to update. Just like the POT file, these kind of files are human readable. The MO file is a machine readable file. You should never open or edit these files as they contain text that only servers are able to read and to use. MO files are generated from PO files. Creating these files can be a bit challenging and time consuming. However, there is a tool out there that takes care of most of the work for us. That program is called POEdit. POEdit is a free tool for generating PO, MO, and POT files. It provides an interface that will take care of doing all the coding for you. It also helps with translations into various languages, even if you don't know the language yourself. One of the benefits of using POEdit is that it has support for WordPress. It'll actually scan your plugins and themes and look for translations so you don't have to. However, to access those features, you will have to pay for the Pro version. I highly recommend you do so. It's definitely worth the money and will save you a lot of time. It's especially useful if you have a large plugin with tons of translatable text. I'll provide a link to this program in the resources section of this lecture. Install it and if you can, purchase the Pro version. If you want to see how this works before buying it, that's fine. Once installed, open up the program and click on the option Translate WordPress Theme or Plugin. First, you will need to select your plugins folder, which is Recipe. Then, select Create a Pot. We need to generate a template first before anything else. Then click Continue. Just like that, POEdit will scan all your files and directories for translations. There's actually one string that has this speech bubble. Click on it, and if you can recall, we use the _x function for this text. This function allows us to define a context for translators. By clicking on it, you'll find this little section called Notes for Translators that displays the context. So far, you can see how powerful this editor is. It gets even better. Click on Save and save this file inside the lang folder and save it as recipe.pot. After saving, POEdit will generate a pot file for you. Let's open up this file in our editor. POEdit will generate the necessary information for translators and the server itself. You'll find this big block of text that contains information that's important only to the server itself. Don't worry about modifying this as POEdit has already optimized this part for you. The next bits are the translations. There are two parts to a translation. The first part is the MSG-ID, which contains the string to translate. The second part is the MSG-STR, which will be the final translated string. On top of these are hashtags that contain information on where to find these strings. Hashtags are considered comments in these files, so you don't have to worry about what's in them. I'm going to close this file. We won't be directly editing this file. We can use POEdit for this. Open up the program again and click on Create New Translation button. Let's select the language French. From here you can start translating these strings. Click on the string you want to translate and you'll be provided with a text box on the bottom for the translation. On the side you'll find a suggestion box just in case you don't know what to put. I'm going to go through all of these and add translations for each string. I'll be using the suggested translations as I don't know any French myself. Pause the video if you need to for this part. Alright, I'm back and I finished translating all these strings. Once you're finished, click on Save. This is where it gets a bit tricky. Translation files have to be saved in a certain format. We have to name this file with a plugin name followed by a dash and the locale. The locale code for French is FR. Our file name should be called recipe-fr_fr.po. Let's look at our lang folder again, and you will now see this new translation. Let's open it up, and just like that, POEdit has taken care of generating this file without us having to write a single line of code. It will also generate a MO file. This MO file is for servers only. Do not do what I'm about to do. I'm going to open up this MO file, and as you can see, everything is just all over the place and messy and unreadable. I'm going to delete this file because my editor will actually modify this code, so I need to recompile this MO file. To do this, I simply go into the File menu and click Compile to MO. Before we finish this lecture, I want to test this translation. I'm going to go to Settings, General in the WordPress admin dashboard. Scroll to the bottom and change the site language to French, or as WordPress calls it, Français. Let's view one of the recipes, and as you can see, our plugin has translated this text to French. I believe I've missed a few translations in the process, but overall it's good to go. And that concludes translating a plugin. Translating a theme is the same process, so go give it a try.